Air quality readings deemed very unhealthy, even hazardous, are plaguing major metropolitan areas.
Some 7 million premature deaths each year, of which 600,000 are children.
In fact, for the most recent years that numbers are available, which I believe is 2015, 8.8 million people around the globe died just from air pollution.
Air pollution is a global health crisis. The air we breathe is killing us at an alarming rate.
Over 9,000 Londoners are dying prematurely as a result of air pollution. Approximately 50% comes from transportation and 40% comes from diesel.
In Britain, air pollution is only second to smoking as a health risk, causing 1/5 of the deaths in London.
Those who have the power to do something about this aren't taking it seriously. Negligence on their behalf is literally killing us.
Air pollution now kills 3 times as many people as AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria combined. Poor government control on emissions means millions of us are dying, and this crisis needs to be dealt with.
Think about this, breathing the air of our streets, of our cities, of our homes has become a public health hazard.
They put the sun to form ozone and to filter them out before they reach the open air. Motorcycle police tried masks while the city launched its biggest, most desperate smog investigation.
With government struggling to explain why we are breathing killer air, is pollution even a priority issue now?
London's air is so dirty, it's been breaching legal limits set out by the EU for years.
Air pollution is now a major issue.
Why is air quality in Britain the worst in Western Europe? And why are we only taking it seriously now?
Hi, I'm Emily, I'm 20... Oh god, sorry.
It's fine.
Hi, I'm Emily, I'm 22, I'm from London, and I've had asthma since I was about 7 years old. I couldn't do as much sports, like PE and stuff was always hard at school. When I was about 13, 14, I almost died because of my asthma. The doctor said I was like 15 to 20 minutes away from dying because I had like such low oxygen in my blood. I missed quite a lot of school as well over the years too, so that probably impacted quite a bit. Obviously you kind of grow out of it a little bit, but my asthma still stayed with me quite a lot. I moved to Guildford about 2 years ago for like a year and a half, and my asthma improved a lot. I didn't need as many prescriptions and I didn't need my inhaler as much, so it was good then. But then I moved back and now it's been a little bit worse again. So
High pollution days lead to more heart attacks, strokes, A&E visits and deaths. Reams of evidence point air pollution to the trigger for cognitive decline, dementia and mental health illnesses such as depression.
in London there's a lot more car pollution, there's a lot more trains and the underground, the Northern Line in particular is really dirty and things like that. In Guildford you don't have that. You're surrounded by a lot of parks and lots of green. There's not as many cars. They don't have an underground or anything like that. Their trains are quite open. When I go to the gym in London, I have to bring my inhaler. But in Guildford, if I forgot my inhaler, I wouldn't really think twice about it. Like if I go out in London anywhere, I have to have an inhaler in my bag or something. If I don't have one, then it panics me into then having an asthma attack. So,
what kind of environmental changes would you want to see in London that would help?
more green space, less car pollution, more overground trains.
Beth Gardner is a London-based environmental journalist and author of Choked, The Age of Air Pollution and the Fight for a Cleaner Future. She's travelled extensively across some of the most polluted areas of our planet and spoken to scientists and victims to explore one of the most important issues of our time.
Beth, great to meet you. Come on in.
How they can improve the...
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah, but it's always about finding like different angles and different,
ways to tell it's really the same story. So I'm an American, as you might guess, and I moved to London about 18 years ago, so it's been a long time. And very shortly after I got here, from very early on, I was always aware that when I went out on the street to walk anywhere, really, I always noticed this smell that bothered me and a sort of thickness to the air. I had lived in New York before. I never noticed that in New York, and it really struck me in London. I thought it was strange, but I never heard anyone talk about it. It didn't seem like something that was on the radar screen at all. Every now and then I'd hear somebody make a joke, you know, living in London can take years off your life, but no one really ever seemed to take that seriously. So I sort of figured, well, this must just be me, it's my imagination. I was doing some research for an article that had to do with the 2012 Olympics in London. It required me to do a little bit of online research and read some of the science about air pollution, how it affects our bodies and what the levels are like here in London and in the UK and Europe more widely. Because this is not just a London problem, it's much bigger. Air pollution affects us in very profound ways and in an enormous variety of ways. It's not just lung and breathing problems, but really every part of our body is touched by the air that we breathe. As a Londoner and as someone who lives here, and I was a mom by that time, I was quite alarmed to realize that I was living in this diesel mess. As a journalist, I thought, this is a story, this is a really important story that is not getting the attention it deserves. Thousands of people in London, the latest estimate is more than 9,000 people in London, 40,000 people in Britain, many hundreds of thousands around Europe are dying every year from the effects of air pollution. I think there's been a lack of public awareness and a lack of public concern. I do think that's starting to change, and I think that turns up the heat on politicians to start taking some action. But I also think it's pretty disturbing when you look back over the past decades and you see that successive governments have really just ignored this issue. The thing that's encouraging about the anger that you sometimes hear now and the concern is that when the public starts to understand a problem and starts to become concerned about it, that is when politicians take note. I think in London we've seen over the last year or two the first really significant action at all in at least a decade in this country on air pollution, and that's coming from the mayor, Sadiq Khan, with his ultra-low emission zone. But Sadiq Khan would be the first to say that it's not enough, that this is not a problem that one city can solve on its own, because it's much bigger than London, and the solutions go beyond the powers that a mayor has, requires action from the central government, from the European Union.
Our current government has a disconcerting record of being taken to court by activist lawyers, determined that ministers should stop ignoring medical evidence on air pollution. The government last year lost a number of court cases demanding them to meet its legal obligations in preventing us from choking on dirty air. Unfortunately, after Brexit, we will lose this EU enforcement, and the government will be freer to set its own rules on targets. This means that we need to be even louder about our want for clearer air.
Currently, the UK is nowhere near meeting its targets, and it doesn't help that the fossil fuel industry is booming.
Top oil firms are spending £153 million a year lobbying to delay and block policies that tackle climate change, which is an issue that goes hand in hand with air pollution.
In total, according to a report from a group of environmental non-profits, the 33 largest global banks donated £1.4 trillion in financing for fossil fuels.
The successful lobbying and direct opposition to policy measures have hindered governments globally in enacting changes according to the Paris Agreement to combat climate change.
Dr. Lauder Pro is an assistant professor of economics at Imperial College Business School. At the moment, she's working on the intersection between health and the environment, ultimately assessing the impact of climate change and pollution on health outcomes and how firms and individuals respond to it.
We're interested in people's behavior, and we're interested in how certain policy affect firms or also individuals. So what I'm doing at the business school, I'm really working at the intersection between health and environment. How people respond to pollution. I do a little bit around what's the impact, assessing the impact of climate change, pollution on health outcomes, either on the demand for health or the provision of healthcare. So air pollution has a wide range of impact, and actually not just health. What we've noticed is that it can have a short-term impact for something like a slight discomfort, where you're just feeling uncomfortable, although you don't have breathing problem. It might make worse certain preconditions if you think of asthma and this kind of things. So it affects a lot of respiratory disease. It makes you it makes you more likely to die prematurely from pollution. It affects people's productivity. So there are causal studies that show that people who are more exposed to pollution becomes less productive. We also see that children at school seems to be performing less. So it might have really a large range of effect that we haven't taken into account so far, or definitely underestimated. We have to implement changes that allow us to be less exposed to pollution. If we can't fix the problem in the short term, at least we need to see what we can do so that people are less exposed. The simple thing to do is simply you don't walk on very busy road where there is a lot of traffic, you should take a side road. So you're not affecting pollution, but at least yourself, you're less exposed. Then we have to open the door to changes coming from the government and introducing policy that would remove the emissions, but that's a very big step. So we should implement policies that at least makes reduce our own emission. One reasonable way is increasing incentives for the individual to behave in a more responsible way. So for example, if we increase transport or public transport in areas which at the moment don't have a good access to the city centre, that would definitely be a good incentive to people who are still driving in the city centre. And I think one of the issues probably we, because scientists, don't communicate properly, or social scientists, don't communicate properly the result. We mention big numbers, or we mention probabilities, or we mention large number of cases, but in a broad area, and people tend to think, oh, this is not me, this is a guy down the road. So I think one way of making it definitely more easier to understand to people is to say, when you go to work, here's how much you've been exposed to. Take all these numbers, those big numbers on the cost of premature mortality, to make them much more specific to individuals and what that means for them.
Somewhere in London that is encouraging environmental education is Roots and Shoots. They provide vocational studies for young people in and around Lambeth and Southwark. Alongside this, they work with local schools and the community and provide a green space for urban biodiversity. Set up in 1982 by Linda Phillips, Roots and Shoots is home to a wide range of wildlife that live within the half-acre of the wildlife garden.
Linda Phillips is the director of Roots and Shoots and shares our vision for a greener London.
We're a charity that began in 1982, but this was a derelict site and this had been used by the civil defence in the last war. We're still improving things and doing all the infrastructure, but the only plant on the whole site at that point was just a white lilac.
Oh, really?
Yeah, hard to imagine that now. So everything you see and all the trees that you see, we've planted over the years, and really to improve the environment as well as provide a lovely educational setting for our youngsters. Having an organisation like this and using the land like this that we do, it's almost like a lung for London. It's for wildlife as well as for people, and we live in harmony. One of the other important things, all the trees and all the things that we grow here, and I don't think some of the locals are quite aware, is that they are pollution filters for the capital. All the trees and the leaves and the shrubs and the grasses filter pollution, which is absolutely crucial for our health. We need more spaces and more trees and shrubs and everything properly planted and looked after to filter pollution in the city. Too many people are on screens, and we all look at screens all the time, but nature to me and the environment is the real world. We need to be closely linked to it, and things go horribly wrong with humanity when we aren't.
Walking, cycling, and electrically powered transport should be the easiest methods of getting about.
Businesses need to reconsider their delivery services, and there needs to be better management of agricultural, burning and farming.
Homes need to convert to non-solid fuel heating systems such as gas boilers or heat pumps.
There are already a number of initiatives in place enacting some of our objectives, but none of these are radical enough for the change that we need to meet targets. We are not without hope though. There is space for optimism and positive change.
Sign our petition now and help us to paint London green.